Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about difficulty settings in Total War Warhammer 3 and how battle difficulty especially can have a major impact on your campaign. I was inspired to make this video by watching the Great Book of Grudges video where he did a time lapse of 1,000 turns, and it was interesting to see how very different it is compared to what I generally experience in my campaigns, because the campaigns I play on this channel, the guides I make, the videos I make, are all based on Legendary very hard. Now, he did that on normal, and there were some very substantial differences. But here's the thing, campaign difficulty, which goes all the way up to Legendary, of course, has a major impact on the AI. It gives them more money, less upkeep, income, growth, you name it, right? So it makes certain races better than others, but it's something easy to understand. Battle difficulty, however, is not necessarily so cut and dry. You may not realize how substantial higher levels of battle difficulty can be on a campaign. So that's what I'm looking to demonstrate over here in this video. Now, I'm not going to go for 1,000 turns of a campaign, but I've gone for 25 turns. Now, right off the bat, I will mention this. I have a campaign here, a Legendary, normal. Then I have another one, as Nakai, both of them being very passive, only taking out the Norscan faction, doing nothing else, just researching, not engaging in diplomacy, though on normal the Eastern River Lords declared war on me. But I went through 25 turns on normal, and then a different campaign, 25 turns, Legendary very hard. It is worth mentioning that tweaking the battle difficulty once you've started a campaign in any way, shape, or form will make a substantial impact on that particular turn when you click that end turn button, or on the turn after, and on a couple of turns after that. And eventually it will stabilize if you keep the battle difficulty as it is. Now, bear in mind, the AI is very aggressive against the player on Legendary, especially if you set the battle difficulty to very high. So you see aggression against you as the player, especially if you're saying very high battle difficulty and very high campaign difficulty. But it doesn't just affect your relations with AI, it also affects the relations between AI factions and their campaign plans. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the campaign map. We're going to go from east to west, starting in Cathay. Nothing much has happened over here, though the vampire counts did invade this southern portion of the map, and they did take this territory before they got kicked out by the Burning Wind nomads. But I'm going to focus on the major factions first. I have to say, by the way, on normal, there's about 174 factions left. On very hard, there's 164. That should give you an idea of something that's been happening. So looking over here with the Legendary Lords of Cathay, Lokir has taken some territory, but he's basically only got 4 regions. Snitch didn't even take his capital, and he's kind of running around with 3 stacks of troops, just running around Cathay. Xiao Ming is also running around. He's got 2 stacks. Two stacks over there, 2 full stacks, and a 3rd stack over there. And Miao Ying is trying to hold back Village, who has taken Wei Jin over here in the north. And then we get Grimgor, who kind of got himself involved in a war against Kolic, though it seems Kolic has lost that war, but it certainly limited Grimgor's campaign potential, because Grimgor is basically down to just 4 regions, including one in the Chaos Waste. One of the things you'll note on lower battle difficulties is that the AI is far more reluctant to attack provincial capitals. Like the situation here with Snitch is very, very common on lower battle difficulty. Doesn't matter what campaign difficulty you're playing on, it is a very common situation. And then Greases, yeah, he's taken over his initial province as well as made some gains in the north, but only now is he besieging Karakazorn. He's probably going to spend the whole 6 turns besieging Karakazorn. Emmerich has taken the Plain of Bones, but that's effectively all that he's done, as well as taking the Black Fortress as well there from the Ogres. Though it looks like he's at war with Tretch. Tretch just controls his initial province. The Darkland Orcs control most of the Darklands. Skarsnik over here in the west is wiped out. But just going over the Darklands, the Darkland Orcs control most of it. Slaves of Zar are moving into the north against the Skaven by the looks of it. And Archeon has taken the Dark Fortress over here. And Boris Ursus is actually just going on an empire building spree, well, to a certain extent, because he's basically going to wipe out the Demon Prince over here, maybe with some assistance from Malice Darkblade. All right, looking at, let's just say Now, this is, of course, a bit complicated, but let's talk about the dwarves. So, Forgrim has wiped out Skarsnik. Karakadrin is at war with Azag, the Slaughterer, who is actually pushing forward. Generally, I don't really expect Azag to have a good amount of survivability, but he does. Vlad is at war with Zufbar, but he hasn't managed to wipe them out. And Draga, for whatever reason, decided to go on the southern adventure over here. A bit of an interesting experience, I have to say. Kislev has taken over the Ostermark, and also Frat is effectively finished. Azazel has achieved nothing against Kostaltan, and instead Azazel went against Krakadrak, and Trog is finished. In Norska, we can see Wolfrey going on his campaign of domination, and Festus is over here in Talabeclan, and we have also Ostlin taking a portion of Talabeclan. By the faction you're also playing, the Legendary Lord you're playing, can have a major impact on the game as well. Like if you're playing an Imperial faction, it has a major impact on Empire, all that kind of stuff. Nakai is probably the closest to a true neutral faction that doesn't affect the campaign in any way, shape, or form. Then we look at Bretonia. Just gonna mention this about Helmengorst. He's taken over his initial province, but he's at war with Kugaf, who, by the way, hasn't even wiped out the initial Lizardman faction over here. Looking at the Bretonian situation, we see Helmengorst. He's at war with the Bretonia. He's at war with Marienburg. Lyonesse has apparently taken Languil over here, though I doubt it's because they're at war with Lewin. It's more likely that the Kemmler took over Languil, and Lyonesse managed to do that. Musalon is finished. Grom has taken some territory, but he's only got 3 provinces in total. Athaloran, like Durfu, has some of this territory, but Karl Franz has also probably put some pressure on Durfu there as well. And Belagar, he's at war with Ikaclaw by the looks of it, though he has some territory. And Warzag is at war with the dwarves by the looks of it. He's taken Barakvar, but he's facing a dwarven counterattack there because Forgrim, having wiped out Skarsnik, is free to move south and put pressure there. So Warzak is probably not long for the world. Sartosa is controlling the Hylia, as well as portions of a small portion of the western border provinces, though they might also be at war with Warzag as well here. Skarbrand controls some territory in the Badlands and the southern Badlands, and Cetra is kind of on the back foot for the moment, whereas Arkhan is staying alive for a moment. He's wiped out the dwarves, and he's likely at war with Rapunzel, or maybe they have some kind of truce over here, though he's also suffered some casualties by the looks of it. And since this is turn 15, Arkhan does have 3 armies, etc. should have 2 armies. Khalida hasn't even managed to take her initial province. She's basically finished. Forik is probably going to finish her off. Krokar hasn't managed to take his initial province, the initial province beyond the first one, the Golden Pass. He hasn't managed to wipe out the Skaven, nor has Teclis managed to wipe out the Skaven. Kairos has taken most of the southern castways to the east, but Axiatl is really going home over here. Holy crap, he's pushing against Kairos. That's something you never see on Legendary very hard, by the way. Axiatl actually winning against Kairos? What magic is this? Though I'm not sure how long it's going to last, because once these armies get thrown, these 2 stacks of troops, like once Kairos finishes this Salenshi faction, if he finishes it, then he turns around on Axiatl. Axiatl is probably not going to be long for the world, though Axiatl does have 3 stacks. He's building a 4th as well. The Kotel Sotek has wiped out their initial Lizardmen, and they've also put a lot of pressure. They've also taken out the Tomb Kings, and they're putting pressure over here probably on the Dark Elves. Itza has effectively wiped out Skrolk with the Spine of Sotek Dwarves. Luthor Harkon is pushing against Itza, though he's facing 2 full stacks over here. He's probably not going to survive that kind of situation. And Alberich has basically accomplished squat. He's not even taken his initial province, really. Marcus Wolfhart is winning by looks of it against the Dark Elves. And then we move against Mazdamundi. Mazdamundi has basically taken over most of the territory over here, though there's still some of the New World colonies left, and Skeggy itself stands. But by looks of it, like, give it 10 more turns or so, and Mazdamundi is going to control this entire province. Moving over to Ulfwan, let's not ignore the huge donut over there. Nakari has lost, effectively. Nakari has taken over Katik, but Telfarian is counterattacking here, though the Skullcrag are interestingly still alive. And Tyrion, it seems he's moving against Calador and likely Count Noctilus as well here to the west. Whereas Alariel, she's just basically down to her initial province as well as the entirety of Safri. The Scourge of Cain is still alive. Looking at the Morathi situation, over here, she's taken over her initial province. She's moving to the north over here. She's taken the entire west of the Ashen Coast. She's also moving in the Iron Sand Desert. She's taken the capital there, but she's likely at war with the Sisters of Twilight, who are also at war with the Dark Elves here in the Bleak Coast. Katep has basically put a lot of pressure on Grombrindal, though Grombrindal is kind of wiping out Malekith by the looks of it over here. Interestingly enough, like Katep might have taken Grombrindal's capital, but Malekith is long before the world, and Alifanar has basically wiped out Silostrad with the exception of her capital. Valkia is kind of on the back foot. She seems to have a lot of issues. Hellebrand has taken most of the northern part of Nagrand, though she might have to deal with Sigvald, or she's at war with Sigvald. Hard to say. Sigvald is moving east. He's taken quite a few dark fortresses over here. Malus Darkblade also doing a decent job at survivability. And that is the campaign situation basically on Legendary Normal. If you set the campaign difficulty lower, it gives the AI less resources, so they'll accomplish even less than this. But aggression is a big factor. Now let's take a look at what happens when you see the AI on Legendary very hard. So they have the same campaign resources as what I've just shown, but let's look at the difference. Keep in mind there is some variability. Things will not always go the same. Things will change. Certain battles can go a certain way, can have a major impact, but let's look at how things are different. Now looking at Legendary very hard, so Nakai again just took the initial province and have been staying quiet since then. The Eastern River Lords haven't done a single thing against me because they have other issues in their campaign. Again, turn 25. No mods used with the exception of Toggle Fog War for me to just show you the campaign map situation. So over here, Lokir has achieved a great deal more. He's actually captured his the Jade River Delta, and he's moving fairly aggressively against Mount Lee, and he's also got the Celestial Lake. Snitch is about to get wiped out over here. He is besieging Xiaoming in the Baleful Hills, but his capital, which he did actually take, Kunlan over here, is under siege by Miaoying, and Miaoying is moving with 3 stacks. Also, Village never got past the Great Bastion over here in this situation, so the Celestial Loyalists are still alive, though they've lost a settlement in their initial province to Lokir. Village actually has ignored the Great Bastion. Now he's arrived in Cafe from the west. Gorst has taken over his initial province. I'm not sure if he's at war with Kugaf. Kugaf controls the entirety of the Dragon Isles, and Emmerich has taken a decent portion of he's taken his initial province. He's taken the settlement over here in the Broken Teeth, and he's also at war with the ogres over here. Greases, he's effectively finished. Actually, the true lord and master of the Mountains of Morn is right here. Yeah, Grimoire is insane, but he's insane on this difficulty in particular. Now, of course, Legendary is meant to be played with higher battle difficulty as well, so if you set the battle difficulty lower, it has a major impact. But you look at Grimgore, he's got 3 stacks, he controls a lot of territory over here, no one's kicking him out. Though it looks like Tretch is going to try and make a run for it with 2 full stacks over there. Tretch does only control his initial province, as well as some settlements here and there, like he controls 2 settlements in the Howling Wastes, as well as Mount Silver Spear as well. Skarsnik in this case has actually taken the Dwarven capital, though Karakadrin has taken over his capital, and Forgrim has moved in the south. But let's get back to that in just a bit. Kolek actually moved east, and he's taken over territory over here instead of ending up in a war. That is a variable. It can happen that Grimgore and Kolek in the war, which obviously slows Grimgore down. It doesn't stop him, to be very, very clear on that. If you think Kolek is going to stop Grimgore, you're about to be disappointed. Greasus is finished. He does have 3 settlements left, but he's lost against Grimgore, like Grimgor just has wiped him, defeated him. So Greece is effectively finished in this campaign. Looking further at Darklands, Isaac is still alive and he controls a good portion of the Ostermark. We'll get into the Empire in a bit. Vlad has actually still not taken Zufbar, but he's also controlling all of Tempelhof, and Gelt is probably putting some pressure over here on him. Kislev has lost some territory to Drika by the looks of it, though Frot again hasn't achieved anything, though Azazel has been more aggressive and more successful against Gestalten. Trog has been more successful. Wulfric does control most of Norsca, and likely these two are at war with each other based on their positioning on their campaign map. The Skaven here have likely put some pressure on Kislev on Prague, but it's probably not enough. Archeon controls 2 free dark fortresses, and Boris Ursus is basically down to his last legs. I don't think he's fought Archeon directly looking at campaign situation, but he's basically down to his last settlement. Malice Darkblade is still alive, though he's got major problems between the Demon Prince, who almost has 2 stacks, and Sigvald coming in from the east over there. And now looking at the Imperial situation, Tempelhof took Talabayam. That is a really shocking development, and I don't necessarily have words for that. Like, what the heck is going on in this campaign? That's not something I've ever seen before, by the way. Though I've never played an Akai campaign, and keep in mind the Legendary Lord you play has a major impact because of the diplomatic dealings you have, and it has domino effect. In this campaign, I've done basically nothing. I've refused any diplomatic agreement, done absolutely nothing here to influence things. Orion apparently is rampaging across the Empire. Carrick Ziflin has taken over a good portion of Baston. The Empire is at war with Kemler. Bretonia has wiped out Musalon, more or less, and Kemler doesn't seem to be long for the world. Grom is effectively finished. Ikeclaw is marching into Bretonia. It's likely he's going to take Carcassonne by the looks of it. And yeah, Gelt controls the entirety of Averland. He's effectively wiped Carcassonne over there, and he might be marching on Nuln in this situation. And here's the thing that's going to happen, by the way, in this difficulty. Once Gelt is finished with Nuln, he's just going to march on Vlad. And Vlad, between the dwarves to the east, potentially Drycut to the north, and the Reichland as well getting involved in that situation, is just going to get wiped out. Now, Azak seems to be doing decently well, though it seems he is still in a war with Dryka, and I would probably put my money on Dryka over there because she does have 2 full stacks, and they're nasty. And you look at Azak, he's only got 1 stack, so yeah, I probably assume Azak isn't long for the world. Festus has taken Hockland, but he hasn't managed to wipe out Midland, and it seems that, like, Karl Franz has moved fairly aggressively north, taken Marienburg, secured their entire territory, taken the Black Pit, wiped out the Greenskins. So yeah, the Empire, believe it or not, on every campaign I've played on Legendary Very Difficulty, I've never seen the Empire wiped out. Sometimes they do worse than others, but I've never seen Karl Franz ever be wiped out on Legendary Hard. On lower difficulties, yes, absolutely, but on higher difficulties, not so much. Let me explain the reason behind this. So, Legendary gives resources. Okay. Very hard affects aggressiveness. Why does that matter for the Empire? Because the Empire is made up of a bunch of factions, and if those factions are reluctant to attack, which they are on lower battle difficulty, then it means that the enemy has a chance to fortify. This benefits Vlad because he can defeat each army individually, probably. But when he's being attacked by 4, 5, 6 armies from the dwarves, from the Empire, he can't react to that. And if those armies are moving very, very aggressively, he's not going to survive that. So over here in the situation, yes, Vlad does have 3 full stacks, but you got Talabayam moving against him, likely Stirland as well, assuming they're not at war with each other. What in the world is Nolan doing over here? I have no idea. But either way, Vlad is going to survive like 10, 20 more turns, but eventually he is going to lose. Frad looks like he's going to lose. And then Wulfric may unite all of Norska if he's at war with Trog, or Trog might unite all of Norska. Depends who kills each other, who kills who over here. And then all of Norska will march down south, but the Empire United will probably defeat them. Now, looking at the situation further south, Belagar, what is Be'lakor up to over here in this situation? He's got an entire army over here against Warzag. Skarbrand is dead, more or less. Queek is still got an entire empire, but he hasn't taken Carrick's Gaul. Now, as I said, there is variability. Things will change depending on the campaign you're playing. But it feels like Mogr is finished. Ikiclaw decided to go on Bretonnia. It's an interesting fact, because usually Be'lakor and Ikiclaw will end up in a war with each other. But on Legendary Very Hard, Ikiclaw will also march on Carcassonne and probably wipe them out as well. Skarsnik is doing pretty damn well for himself, but I don't think that's necessarily gonna last, especially if Warzag gets wiped out. Then you can imagine Be'lakor is going to help out. And if Ungrim is right here, which he is, then yeah, guess who's not long for this world. I mean, Kara Zakarak is going to fall, that's for certain, though. Whether or not Skarsnik takes it, that's a different discussion. I didn't even realize that Kara Zakarak hadn't fallen, actually. Like, Skarsnik is just besieging it. He hasn't taken it, and he's got pressure coming in from the south. The AI has this stupid idea of besieging settlements, which they could think. Like, I'm fairly certain Skarsnik's army here could out-resolve the battle against the Karas and Kara Zakarak. But they're not going to do so wasting time. Like, that's one of the really bad things about the AI when it comes to siege tactics. Like, even on this difficulty, make no mistake, the AI is really bad at empire building. It's really bad at conquering the map. Because what it does, it's like, oh, here's how we siege. We spend 6 turns besieging a settlement, then we attack on a massive amount of siege hours. You know what happens with 6 turns? A full bloody sack, 2 stacks. Like, I could run across half my empire within 6 turns, show up, annihilate you. Now, the AI will usually attack this element when they see you approaching, in that particular case, but it may not necessarily matter. So, but you could sneak up on them and wipe them out. The reason they'll attack is they know they'll win, so they'll sack their settlement and just run away. It's pretty annoying. Looking down south, what is Skarbrand doing in Lamia of all places? But yeah, he's effectively finished because Forik is right over here with a full stack of troops. Skarbrand is not going to be able to stand up to that. Poor Khalida, she's just been brutalized in these campaigns. She is down on her last leg. Krokgar has taken over his entire territory. Tic-Tac-Toe has taken over the territory. Teclis still has the territory over here to take down. Now, Axiatl is still putting a lot of pressure on Kairos, but that's because Kairos is in the east. Or is he in the east? I'm not entirely certain. No, he is in the east for whatever reason. But once these stacks move west, Axiatl is simply going to lose. Give it 20 turns, 15 turns. Like, once these armies show up, you got 2 full stacks over here against free stacks. I'm going to put my money on Axiatl losing because his army is just worse than Out-Resolve over here. Then we look over at Lustria. Rakarf has done much better over here, really putting a lot of pressure on the Cult of Sotik. Skrolk is still alive, though Itza is dealing with that particular issue by the looks of it. Ulfar Harkon has taken some territory. Alberg has actually managed to take his initial province and actually taken some territory over here. It's weird to see the Cornate faction over here and the Siege faction over here still alive. Marcus Wolfrart, Sally, he is done. He's lost his army over here. I mean, he's not on the map, so his army got wiped out. The Blue Vipers took over. What is this campaign? Like, it's so insane, so ridiculous. I've never seen the blood hole falling to an AI faction, but I guess weird things do happen. Mazdamundi has taken some territory, but he still got some resistance from the AI. Marathi has moved over north, though she hasn't necessarily achieved as much success. Though she does control Arnheim, like that's the key thing. On higher battle difficulty, the AI is more willing to attack major settlements. So you see Noctilus over here in Ulfwan. He's taken 2 gates, which you would be very unlikely to see on a lower difficulty. And Nakari over here controls Kotik, controls the settlement. Though you got Alariel, Elfarian, and Tyrion is just going to sweep aside every situation here. I said it before in various guides that Nakari and Noctilus on Legendary Very Hard tend to do well for about 30 turns, but then they just lose. And when I say lose, like, you see what Nakari and Noctilus are about to deal with. It doesn't matter that Be'lakor is also here in this situation, though. I'm not sure Be'lakor is a friend of Nakari in this particular context, because Be'lakor is just an asshole, more or less, against everyone. He's a troll, he's a bully. Tarx is still alive. Yeah, shockingly enough, Tarx is still alive. Doing pretty well for himself. The Katep has 2 full stacks by this point. Grombrindle is on his last legs, more or less, over here. He's under siege by 2 full stacks. Yes, he has some forces over here, but he's not going to be able to defeat Malekith. So Grombrindle can do very well on a lower battle difficulty, but on a high battle difficulty, he's going to lose. Valkia is effectively finished over here, because Hellebrand has a full stack. Valkia has lost her army, so she's not going to recover. Sigvald has a lot of territory here. And Ali Fanar, he's still fighting Lustra over here. And the Sisters of Twilight are doing pretty well for themselves. And that's effectively the campaign situation. So, what would be some conclusions in this from my perspective? Beyond, which faction wins and how. Well, I would say that higher battle difficulty, it benefits factions that are aggressive and then benefit from the aggressiveness. This is the reason why on Legendary Very Hard, Grimgor does this. And he'll always do this. Just a note, when the Chaos Dwarves come out, this is turn 25. You've got 4 stacks under Grimgor by turn 25. And if you think that's going to be different when the Chaos Dwarf DLC comes out, I don't necessarily think so, by the way. So imagine dealing with 4 full stacks with WAs attached to them as the Chaos Dwarves. Yeah, it's buying power, everyone. If you call dealing with this, if you call dealing with an endgame crisis from turn 1 buying power, sure, go ahead. But this is the kind of situation, whereas on lower battle difficulty, it wouldn't be the same situation, because Grimgor is less reluctant to attack. So it benefits those aggressive factions, especially early on in a campaign, right? So it benefits the disorder forces, if you will, forces of chaos, in a lot of ways. But eventually, here's what ends up happening. The order factions, they're weaker early on in the early game, but what they benefit from is growth. Like, they get stronger as you play. Like, you think of the dwarves, you think of the high elves, you even think of Cathay. So the more campaign drags on, the stronger they get. And this creates a common situation that you might see in a lot of these campaigns, where, for the most part, it's the order factions that win these battles in the long term, if they don't get wiped out early on. Like, Kislev may struggle, some other factions may struggle, but for instance, I've never seen the Empire wiped out on Legendary very hard. I've seen some campaigns where they've done poorly, but most of the time, the vast majority of times, they wipe out Vlad, they unify the Empire, and they become a major issue. So it benefits factions with early game aggression, but it also benefits in the long term factions that grow. Because look at an Empire, a bunch of factions united against a couple of threats. On lower difficulties, the problem is getting the AI to do anything against those major threats. But on higher difficulties, they will do actually a lot. So you can look at a situation Vlad is going to encounter. He's likely going to have all of the factions, the 2 Dwarven factions, Gelt, maybe Talabayam, all marching on him soon enough, and he's not going to be able to survive that kind of situation. And once that's done, don't be surprised if Master Gelt ends up the master of the Empire, or if Karl Franz actually ends up master of the Empire, assuming Festus doesn't wipe out Karl Franz. Though, considering the armies that Karl Franz has, where is he anyway? He's probably over here, right? So, considering the armies that Karl Franz has in this situation, I doubt that's going to happen. So, order benefits on a higher difficulty for the most part, with the exception of like Grimgor or factions that are isolated basically and can pick their fights. Because the benefit Grimgor has on this difficulty is the fact, one, he's going to take territory very aggressively, but no one's going to show up to stop him in the late game. That's the thing. That's the issue for a lot of the Greenskin factions. Like, oh, they take a lot of territory early on, but then everyone just ganks up on them. Well, no one's ganking up on Grimgor. He's got 2 minor Greenskin factions protecting his flanks in this current version of the game. And Ogres, they don't necessarily hate him. He's the one actually driving the aggression here. He's the one with the initiative in this situation. That's the benefit he's getting. That's why he creates such a major empire and becomes such a major thorn in the backside for everyone that starts a campaign in this situation on Legendary very hard. But on higher difficulties, the factions of order, or rather the factions that grow stronger as you play the campaign, benefit. But why is that? Well, aggression means more conquest. More conquest means more territory. More territory means a stronger economic base. So if you want to see the order tide, yeah, play on a high, very high, the highest possible difficulty in the game. You will never see Chaos taking over the world on Legendary very hard. You'll certainly see all of Norsca and the Chaos Wastelands united under certain factions, but the Empire falling to Chaos or Vampires or anything like that, no. Bretonia falling to Grom, Ulfwan falling to Morathi or Noctilus or anything like that, unlikely. Like, maybe if Morathi does decide to interfere in the Ulfwan situation, sure. But that's very rare, and she's got another problem, because once Hexoatl is finished uniting all of these factions, they might march on the Hunts Marshal, sure, or they can just as easily march on Morathi, so it's a bit iffy with that situation. Morathi's also going to have to deal with the Sisters of Twilight over here, and maybe potentially Katep. Like, if you play Morathi, it's very easy, but you're using diplomacy in that situation. So yeah, some major differences, significant impact just from the battle difficulty alone. Now, do I think this situation is fine? Well, no. I think that one of the great things Creative Assembly did in Warhammer 3, to be clear, and they didn't do it initially, it happened in a patch before Immortal Empires came out, but a lot of people are annoyed by the auto-resolve situation, right? So what they did is they went and they removed auto-resolve from being factored in with campaign difficulty, and it's factored in by battle difficulty. That's what drives the aggressiveness, I think. If I were to make a guess, I don't know how the scripts work, but my guesswork is that the AI will be aggressive when it thinks it can win, and higher battle difficulties just gives it an advantage and makes it think they can win. Now, this is kind of one of those situations where you see those odd scenarios where the AI just attacks a settlement of yours and you just auto-resolve and wipe their entire army. It's not even a contest, really. But the AI thinks it can win. So I think that was possibly a mistake, as I see it, personally. Because it's not necessarily tied to the reality on the ground. I don't think the AI is necessarily doesn't necessarily know what its chances are before a battle. It calculates it based on a number of factors, including the battle difficulty modifiers, which affect auto-resolve. So it's making its decisions based on what it sees are its chances, and because battle difficulty increases those chances, they're more aggressive because of that. That's the key element. A lot of people have complained that the AI built smaller empires. Yeah, on lower difficulties, they do build smaller empires, but I've seen pretty massive empires and campaigns that I've played, past turn 50, 60, 70. You will start seeing massive empires in this game with control of a huge territory. Now, the AI is less willing to confederate, so you're not going to see a situation like Malekith controlling all of Nagron and being faction strength number one in the world like you did in Warhammer 2, because Hellbronn's never going to confederate them. I've never seen that happen personally. Morathi's not going to confederate them either, so that's obviously a limiting factor. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because I can tell you one thing. Conquering Nagron in Warhammer 3 is a lot harder than in Warhammer 2 from my perspective, because the AI is bad at managing a huge, massive empire, believe it or not. It can handle, let's say, 2 free stacks just fine, a couple of provinces just fine. That's always been the case. But managing a massive empire with a dozen stacks, it does so very, very poorly, from my perspective. So when you're dealing with 2 AI factions, each of which has free armies, you'll see that the AI generally achieves greater success in that than it would with just one faction controlling 6 armies. So, for instance, if you're invading Nagron, you get to deal with 2 different factions which have different decision-making behind them. And you might win against Malekith, so he gets put on the defensive, then Hellebron just attacks you because she's not put on the defensive. She hasn't lost her army, so she's being aggressive. And that's the kind of impact you can see from battle difficulty and some of the design decisions. I personally vastly prefer Warhammer 3 versus Warhammer 2. I'm sorry, the way campaigns were in Warhammer 2 was awful in the long term. That's my perspective. I know a lot of people can find that particular perspective very controversial, but that's where I stand. Looking at this situation, I mean, it's very interesting to see how just battle difficulty can change campaigns. Of course, I would love to see this kind of aggressiveness from the AI without having to manually fight every single siege battle. Like, if I could have that in my campaigns, that would be fantastic. Unfortunately, that's not what we have right now. Maybe it will be changed in the future. We don't know. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.